One of my favorite things about the Nintendo 3DS era, during and even looking back on it, is the amount of smaller titles released on the eShop. This didn't just lead to random indies showing up on the service, which they did do, but to push more people towards this new eShop world, brand new universes were born and pushed to be staples of this digital Nintendo lineup, with some of those legacies extending to the Wii U and even on the Switch. I'm talking games like Pushmo, Dylan's Rolling Western, the Denpa Men. There is a lot to go over here, but first, let's talk about the Square Wonder Kirby, brought to us by the team responsible for Kirby, Picross 3D, and the best 3DS launch title of all, Face Raiders, with the series BoxBoy. What, you thought Kirby was simple and cute by just being a circle with hands, feet, and a face? Try a box with some black lines and still managing to be kind of adorable. I love HAL Labs so much. Starting off with the original BoxBoy here, it's basically as simple of a premise as you can think of. We are introduced to Kirby. He is a little block guy, and his whole thing is he can't really do a whole lot. He can't really jump super far, and he can't really do much else of anything. That's just it. But he has the ability to spawn boxes from himself, and you can use that to solve puzzles and handle platforming. Sometimes there are some enemies to deal with, we gotta guide them the right way. But yeah, that is the name of the game here. You're in a 2D platformer, and you gotta figure out, okay, I gotta go from point A to point B, there's a bunch of gaps everywhere, how do I figure out how many blocks to put down so I can make my way in one piece? Now, it would just be one thing if you were just meant to rush through until the end, and then of course you can just use as many blocks as you want, you'll figure it out. But no, that's not the case. In a good puzzle game fashion, there are some limitations to keep in mind. Every level gives you a box limit, aka how many blocks you can spawn at any given time, and you can only have one set of boxes at any given point. So if you're standing on a set that you already laid out and you go to set up some more, that original set is going to go away, and that is important because that does change in later entries. And then also, if you want to be good at this game, there is a crown that you can achieve in each level by getting to it before you hit this box counter that is listed out for every stage. It's basically like golf, you're trying to get under par every single time. You can go over if you want, but you want to try to be good because there is a minimum that you can hit. And in a true test of game design mastery that HAL Laboratories is, of course, they're really good at, I'm not surprised by this, there is a lot that they do with this basic idea of you are a little box guy and you can spawn other boxes. There is the simple stuff of always wanting to bridge gaps, of course. You'll eventually learn there's this way you can hook some boxes over you so you can do a jump, land there, and then you can pull yourself back in from the boxes that you set out. That is a very common trope. There's a bunch of switches that you'll be pressing to open up doors and whatnot. There's eventually some grabbing machines, like a little arcade. There's a grabbing machine, so you gotta place boxes above you and then you can be grabbed by it and you can be transported to another spot. There are sometimes you're connecting circuits. There's a positive and a negative block on the stage and you gotta connect them by one string of boxes in a way that you're able to, of course, continue the stage. There's also a bunch of like screen warp things where there'll be like a bunch of dark clouds on both sides and it does like the Pac-Man effect of you jump down and it'll show up at the top of the other side. Like there's a lot. There's actually a lot here, and what's nice is you do move through these levels pretty quickly, honestly. Like I don't know if it's just because I was good at it, but it doesn't really get super difficult. I was just able to mash through the game with like no waiting, and everything just feels good. Everything feels super snappy and responsive, and just seeing at all times on the bottom screen like, okay, I have this many boxes left so I can figure out what I'm doing here, not in a speedrun fashion, but in a way that I don't feel like every single time I'm trying to figure out what to do, I'm just wasting my time twiddling my thumbs. Every new world does introduce a new core idea that of course shows up through the rest of the levels and will sometimes be called back upon and later on in the game, and there are a bunch of different worlds, and while it doesn't necessarily get difficult for a good long time, near the end game, and especially with some post-game challenges, the game does get kind of difficult. Once again, not to just figure out how to beat the stage, though there are some times that happens, but trying to get that par, trying to get all the crowns, that's where the challenge is. One of the nice things that's super charming about the BoxBoy series is you'll often get costumes. You'll be collecting this currency throughout the game, and there's a shop back in the hub world, and then yeah, you can deck out your little BoxBoy however you want. I really like it when he was a super cool guy with the backwards cap and sunglasses. He does look kind of badass just for being a four-sided creature. I do like that. And this just really depends on how much you like the costume idea in any game. Anyway, like, it's been something that's been more so showing up in games within the last decade or so. Just more and more games are having a simple costume idea, and I love it. It's such a good way to make a currency in a game feel more important, because I love every single world going to see if I can change up how you look, because why not? You're only dealing with 2 colors here, may as well spice it up. What's interesting though is that none of the costumes change any of your abilities, as you would expect, but in some of the post-game challenges, you can get a costume like the ninja, which lets you move faster. There's also a bunny that lets you jump higher, and those sort of challenges are only restricted to the post-game, but it's just cool that they're there in the first place. It's something that doesn't really get a ton of use later on in the franchise, but there are some select challenges. If you're really looking to 100% these games, there's something there. There is challenge there. You do gotta almost beat the entire game to get to it, but it is there, and at least the ride getting there is nice and charming and still gets your brain a little bit active along the way. I should also mention that there is a story, like there is a plot that is trying to connect everything together, and they did try, and I think just because I like the character designs, I'm cool with it, but it is one of those like, how much up for interpretation do you want to let this plot be? Because it's just a basic puzzle game, but there's like a story of this evil dark cloud is kind of messing up with your planet, and you got your family members that you got to save, because eventually over time you'll find a female box girl with QC. There's also a long one with QD, and later on there are like these moments where there's like an energy force that the box boys have, and they're integral to the survival of the planet. Okay, man, it's cool. There's a bit of a consistent thread throughout at least the 3DS trilogy, but obviously this is not a plot-heavy game. Don't worry about it. And that basically wraps up the first BoxBoy game. Like, one of the beautiful things about this series is it is a true case of what you see is what you get, but there is a lot more under the surface. The very core, basic idea of you can spawn boxes around you is so easy to understand immediately when you press the start button, but then there is a lot of complexity and a shocking amount of thought put into this. I mean, it's not really any surprise that you would think that HAL Laboratories, the Kirby developers, would have a lot of ideas behind a simple idea, but yeah, trust me, if you still go back and play this original game, you may be surprised. There's a lot to this, and it is a great launching off point for the future games in the series, where things get expanded even more. BoxBoy starts off immediately where the last game left off. Once again, it doesn't matter, but just the fact that that consistency is there is nice. Hey, look at that, you're back to being the QB, and you gotta place boxes again to get around. Of course, what a surprise. The main gimmick with this new one is while the core basic idea of going from left to right, doing a bunch of different platforming challenges, trying to get under par to get the crowns, that is still the same. Now, you have the ability to spawn 2 sets of boxes at once. And as you can expect, that does expand things a whole lot over the first game. Just take the simple idea of, okay, there's a big long gap of spikes now that one set of blocks isn't going to be able to handle. Of course, you just throw 2 in there and you're good to go. Maybe there are 2 switches you need to hit instead of 1. Okay, that makes sense, but then you gotta start thinking a little more creatively. There's some lasers that you have to avoid, so you gotta place a block above you, but I also have to place these boxes down there so I can platform at the same time. Okay, so I gotta put a little bit of thought into it. It's still not super difficult until the very end of the game, but they did manage to squeeze out an entire other multi-hour long puzzle quest with such a simple idea that just has one little tweak to it. This whole 2-set idea also introduces some color into the world. That's nice. I mean, the first game wasn't 100% devoid of color, but seeing a little bit of green now pop up really shines. Otherwise, this is just more of the same, just with the whole 2 sets of boxes idea, and it does go a very long way. It's something that you will appreciate more if you do play the first game, and then you can go, okay, I can see how this can add a lot to the basic idea, and sure enough, it does, but no real surprises. It's just a very fun, solid set of puzzles that are similar to the first game, snappy, responsive. You can go through the majority of the main game, no problems, maybe some challenges for the crowns, but then you get to the end, and then sometimes you gotta put your thinking cap on a little bit stronger, and there is a post-game challenge world. Only one. Bit of a shame. It's not like this game is lacking in content, but only having one challenge world is a bit disappointing. And then the costumes, these are in full effect as well. A whole new slate of attires that you can get from the clothing store by the currency that you're getting. And what's also kind of cool is if you have save data from the first BoxBoy, all of those costumes will migrate to the second game. Easy peasy, don't gotta unlock them, they're just all right there. And I like that. I like being rewarded for playing the previous games when I go to the sequel. That's nice. The story, I don't know. I guess the implication now is that we're in QB's dreams, because the game starts off, you're sleeping there after saving the day in the first game, and I don't think the game ever really pans out of that shot of you going into the head. I guess that's it, and maybe that can further justify why in future games you can't set 2 sets of boxes. Okay, you're slowly bringing your family into the world. So that's, you know, there's some, I don't care. It's worth pointing out that they did try with this story, but it does not matter. But before immediately jumping into the next sequel, one additional piece of charm that was added to this game are the unlockable comics that you can get. Back in the shop where you can get costumes, there is now a comic section that has the basic comic structure of 4 panels, and you try to tell a quick punchline, it's cute, you move on, bada bing, bada boom. I always like these. With characters as simplistic as this, trying to actually get some personality out of them now, it's nice. It's not a lot. Quite frankly, I think they're all just a bunch of idiots that are just trying to live out their day, but I'm cool with that. I am a-okay with that. One of the final unlockable comics is Kirby going through all of the different hats that Kirby has had over the years, and then Kirby's like, oh man, I don't know, there's a tension now. I don't know about this, are we gonna fight? And that's it. Just one little cute Kirby cameo because the game is made by the Kirby developers. I like that. Of course I do. But that charm goes such a long way for a game that is otherwise incredibly simplistic. I don't necessarily know if BoxBoy is better than just BoxBoy, but it does have a lot of more neat ideas by just taking the simple formula and adding one extra set of blocks. It's just as good, and it's just, as a proper follow-up, it does exactly what it needed to. So another banger with this one, and now we move on to the third game and the final in the trilogy on 3DS. You see, even though the story wasn't important at all, it is worth following what's been going on in the previous 2 games, because when the third game is titled Bye Bye BoxBoy, there's something that's clearly about to go down, and I don't know if I'm emotionally ready for it. Once again, the game takes place immediately after the second game ends by having you go into this box ship, and you gotta restore multiple planets from the black smoke now, as opposed to just one. Cool, I'm down with it, just whatever gets me to do more puzzles. So for following the theory that the entire second game BoxBoy was just a dream, and okay, we don't gotta worry about having to guarantee that we have 2 sets of boxes in this third one. It's not there anymore. We're back to just 1 set of boxes, so right from the very beginning, a lot of the puzzles do feel very similar to the first game. Art style wise, you might think it's a little bit different because hey, there's a few more patterns going on in the tile set, sometimes more colors shows up, more than just like the couple colors for the multiple sets of boxes. Like, there's a little bit more to look at, especially on the box ship. Like having a full-blown overworld like this, it did exist in the previous games, but something here, you can tell they tried a lot more to flesh out what you're doing here. I'm an interstellar planet saver, I guess. Okay, now once again, the idea, exactly the same, everything is as snappy and responsive as you want it to be. The main gimmick with this one is every few stages now, you are saving one of your cube babies. They're these little tykes roaming around here and you gotta save them, which leads to one major level type shift. There's some escort missions now. Okay, sort of similar to the original Mario vs. Donkey Kong where you're guiding the mini Marios around the stage. That's kind of what these are too. These little cube babies are following you, maybe on a different path, and you gotta set things right so they can come with you and get to the end. Okay, cool, that changes things up. Once again, I like that. But then also, Kirby can gain some new abilities too, coming in the form of brand new gimmick boxes. You got these boxes that will blow up after a few seconds in a very Bomberman styled cross section. You got these boxes that once you set them up, no matter where they are in the tail, you will warp to it after a couple seconds. That does go, oh man, that one is actually kind of difficult when you're trying to deal with things going under par. Got these rocket boxes where you place them and then they all travel upward and then they'll stay at the top for a few seconds. That of course goes a long way. And then there are these remote boxes where you place them down and then you can move them after placing them. So you can make them go way further than you would by just having them connected to you. So by this stage in this series, you can basically see exactly what these games are going to be all about. We have a few new ideas, there's a bunch of different levels to go through, and of course there is a steady progression of difficulty as you progress. Not a whole lot of difficulty in the early parts of the game. End game, it's a lot tougher, and now there are multiple challenge worlds with different rule sets, and that's what I wanted, because well, again, main game super charming, but I wanted the challenge. I wanted to really put my mind to the test, and this game does that excellent. I didn't do any specific numbers here to know exactly how many stages are in this third game compared to the other two, but it does feel like this is the most content-dense game of the franchise so far. That goes a long way from like the presentation of it as well. You can jump in and play as QC, which is kind of cool. The first time you can play as the girl one, as opposed to putting on a bow as QB and saying, oh, I'm a different one now. Like, no, you can actually just play as the other character. They're trying to establish these guys as a big family now. This goes a long way, being able to play as her. But I do want to talk about the costumes again real quick because, oh, there's some cool stuff here. Bye Bye BoxBoy introduces amiibo support for not only the very expensive QB amiibo, which unlocks a Game Boy styled graphical filter, that's kind of cool, but also you can take advantage of the Kirby amiibo to give you a whole set of full color. You can play as the Kirby characters, they have different types of blocks. That's really charming. There is also a UFO costume that you can get. in these games, and it's very similar to Jobski from the Part-Time UFO game, which is also by HAL Laboratories. This cross-love going on with the HAL Labs games. I love it so much. Go and play Part-Time UFO on the Switch as well if you haven't yet. The comic section in the store returns as well, with the 4-panel structure being exactly like it was last time. And yeah, once again, very charming. There's one here where QB has a big old headache, and then he just spawns another box, so now he just doesn't have a headache anymore. That was it. They all worried for nothing, and that was it. There's another Kirby reference in this one, specifically with Planet Robobot, and man, once again, I love that. Just, man, my Kirby biases really show here because it's so cool to look at. As for the plot, we have been talking about it through the 3 games so far. I don't really want to spoil it, but this is where the most important plot points really all come together, with the whole idea of you being these universe, planet-saving creatures. I guess kind of strong implications at the very end of the game with cutscenes and whatnot that go way harder than I thought they were going to, but basically when the game says bye-bye BoxBoy, I do think this is probably the end of this BoxBoy. As you know, there is an additional game in this franchise, so I don't know if this is like some multiversal stuff or whatever, I don't know. But the basic idea that this game ends off with is that the babies, the Q babies that you save, begin to roam because you've made the place a little bit safer for them. That doesn't really mean a whole lot when we move on to the following game, but once again, man, they really tried. They really tried with this story. It is totally up for interpretation, all of it. There's nothing set in stone. That's why I kind of like just the basic 4-panel comics more than the actual plot, because like, why is it so dark? Like, the characters are sacrificing themselves every game is crazy. Like, the best part about any kind of plotline thing is that all the games end with the same idea of like, okay, you did most of the game. The very final bit of the final level is this area where like these big black boxes kind of open up a pathway and then you can get to the very final portal. Like, all the games end in the same fashion. That's cool. But yeah, it's wild, and I would love to know what everyone thinks about the plot, because now going forward into the 4th game, the plot matters less than ever before. Once Bye Bye BoxBoy released for the 3DS and we were moving on to the Switch, myself, as well as a bunch of others in the, however big it was, the fan base for this franchise, thought that was basically it. Nintendo would re-release all 3 games on a physical cartridge, Japanese exclusive, that's where that very expensive QB amiibo comes from, but otherwise, that was it. I kind of thought that would just be the end, and maybe if we go to the Switch, maybe there'll be an HD remaster. That would make sense to me, but no, out of nowhere, we're getting a brand new BoxBoy game. So much for bye-bye. So immediately, the thing that is worth pointing out is that we finally get this game on not only a console, not only in HD, but also with just such a wide, very, very wide color palette. Everything moves at such a smoother frame rate too, like man, it just looks really nice. Obviously, it's very simplistic. It's not like it's one of the greatest games to grace modern gaming, but it looks super clean, and I really like the presentation by taking this game and finally moving on to an HD console with the Switch. I will say though, one of the things that was sacrificed here is the UI is a bit clunkier. Things don't really feel as snappy as it once was, not just because of like the gameplay control. Like, the game control is fine, but some of the things that are not presented to you immediately are the box totals to get some of the better rewards. The bottom screen in the 3DS game at all times said you have to get these crowns before you put out this many boxes, otherwise you can't get them. Here in BoxBoy plus BoxGirl, nah, just the amount of boxes you can put out, and then only when you beat a stage, or if you go and check out the targets in between stages on the level select screen, can you see, oh okay, that's how I get the crowns that I need. That's a little bit annoying. Not a major deal breaker, but definitely an unfortunate oversight. The planet's being overrun by black smoke once again. I don't know what the story is. Once again, it could be a multiverse thing with this BoxBoy and there's multiple QBs. I don't know. The most important thing here, BoxBoy plus BoxGirl. Yes, the gimmick is BoxGirl, QC, plays an integral role in the gameplay right from the very beginning. This game boasts the most amount of levels in any BoxBoy game so far, with over 270 to play through. However, these are split between 3 different stories. The very basic BoxBoy gameplay is a tale for one, and yeah, it's just more BoxBoy, no complaints here. There are some extra gimmicks for sure, like you can dig through dirt and you can ground pound, there are some springs and gravity and more warp points, like the typical rollout of new ideas that you would come to expect, but you just play as one character, you just have one set of boxes, and one of the whole things is that now in between worlds you can change between QB and QC whenever you want. that's really about it. As far as Tale for One goes, that's it. You can play as BoxBoy or BoxGirl, and you do have some more customization options as too. Not only are you getting costumes like in before, but they come in parts. Instead of one whole costume, you get multiple parts that you can string together, and you get these parts via a gacha machine, so it's all random. You can mix and match to your heart's content. Both characters have a different costume whenever you play as them. It's nice. Once again, the charm for these games is on point. Where things begin to get a little bit more spicy with this gameplay formula is in the Tale for Two story, where yes, you get to play as both characters at the same time, which means local co-op puzzle solving. This is so cool. I love this. This justifies a brand new game completely. Now, if you don't play the game in local co-op, you do the typical puzzle platformer thing. If you control one character, then you can swap control to the other character where the other one just stays there. And it's still fine, you know, it gets the job done. It does make you change your way of thinking and approaching these levels. It's still different than the BoxBoy idea of two sets of boxes. Now it's two different characters, and a lot of the times the two characters have different limits, as opposed to just being two of the same character every single time. Sometimes one character can only place 3, the other one can place 5. And figuring out what works and what doesn't is fun. It becomes more fun though when it's local co-op and you can't take the same role of being the provider every single time. Sometimes the other person's got to step up if they have more boxes to play with, alright? That's just the name of the game. Otherwise, there's no major differences that you can expect out of this. Because it's co-op focused instead of solo focused, I do think it is a little bit easier because you're trying to factor in 2 brain cells as opposed to just 1. But once again, this provided another really fun set of different challenging worlds where you're working together, placing a bunch of boxes, and you just move on. Pretty typical stuff at this point. And when you first start the game, these are the only 2 stories that you can play. And it is worth noting that once again, there is a story, and if you really are trying to pay attention to what's going on, it is a little dark, because like you find these kind of decrepit Q babies throughout the story, and you're kind of looking at them like, oh man, this is not good, something bad must have happened here, and then you'll get a new power-up from them, which are a lot of times just old power-ups like being able to hook onto platforms. You were able to do that before, but then you get the power and the baby disintegrates, and it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, and also the stories, you get like kind of bad endings because you're expected to do all of the stories to get the good ending, almost Sonic Adventure. Like, it's wild. This really is not a franchise of just happy-go-lucky family time when your boxes, like, no. There's like weird, dark, apocalyptic undertones going on with this box franchise. It's crazy. But you care about the gameplay here. One of the biggest new changes with this franchise is when you first beat the Tale for One, you unlock another story, the third story, A Tall Tale, where for the very first time you get to play as the long boy, Cutie. And you can tell right off the bat how this changes the entire game. No longer are you one single box where you're the same length on every side. No, now you gotta handle with sometimes I wanna go long, sometimes I wanna go wide. You can't mix and match those, but you still gotta figure it out because man, this changes everything. It starts off very simple, the same way a typical BoxBoy game does. You get your grasp on how this whole new box format works, like no problem there whatsoever, but then yeah, sure enough, soon later on, it does get way more difficult. This is the first time in the entire franchise where you have to completely retool your brain to how to approach these puzzles. The gimmicks are very much the same, that's no problem there, but how you approach those gimmicks and still go for the crowns and the medals? Yeah, this is some truly challenging stuff, and again, once BoxBoy is challenging, that's where it gets good. But yeah, you do all these stories, you save the day. If any of these games are ever difficult, there is a hint system that can help you out. No problems there. You have some challenging levels, like once again, there are some post-game challenges with like the balloon challenge now in BoxBoy plus BoxGirl. You know, same thing there. As it currently stands, BoxBoy plus BoxGirl is the latest game in the franchise. I'm sure it's not dead. I'm sure we'll be getting more in the future because why not? It's such a simple idea that still has a ton of potential. But as it currently stands, I love these games. Of course I do. It's by HAL Labs, the Kirby developers. Of course I love these games. The 3DS eShop going out there to offer some nice bite-sized experiences allowed this franchise to begin in the first place. And sure, maybe if it was just a pure console thing right from the jump, it would have found an audience there for sure. But I remember just getting there, just wanting some of those pick up and play games that were digital exclusive, and this hit that perfectly, and I've become a big fan. And I hope you'll stick around with me for the forthcoming future because we got a lot more eShop exclusive Nintendo games to talk about very soon. Like Part-Time UFO, I mentioned it already, but like holy cow, play Part-Time UFO, this game's great. There are 4 BoxBoy games and only one of these? That's a shame.